Pleasure to me all at last, and now we've come around for the new year of 2026. Because I had talked about Avatar: The Way of Water, as well as Avatar: Fire and Ash, which was of course a more recent release, but I figured why not put in another bonus episode. Because even though I'm going to be taking a break from films I should have talked about years ago for a little while, I might as well throw in this piece as another bonus because Anaconda 2025. Just think, a good 28 years of evolution had come around since the first Anaconda film came around, and it truly exposed the dangers of this massive snake in the Amazon. Moreover, just the fact that remaking a certain piece into a whimsical piece of comedy for 2025, we've already gotten a good amount of things for 2025 comedy related, but maybe this one actually does the best that it can to wrap up the year in a unique way. Because first of all, there's Jack Black, Paul Rudd, and Steve Zahn. First of all, memorable names that really caught my eye, and my ears too. In fact, when I went to go see this a few days ago, I kid you not, there were a few expectations I had in line. Because I'm sure most of you guys know that with the original starring the likes of Ice Cube, Jon Voight, and whatnot, Anaconda was certainly a film, unlike some others, in correlation to animal or horror. It was more of a mixture of both those things. And while there are many other films that came around as well, even before Anaconda's release, such as Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, for instance, it's important to note that Anaconda was something else at the time. And 28 years later, having remade it, we can happily say that this one does a good job, at least trying to remain faithful to the original, but at the same time establishing some fresh new lore. You see, we have the likes of our company in mind. Griff, played by Paul Rudd, and Doug, played by Jack Black. These, of course, are two men whom are known for making films. Doug has been known over the years for making wedding videos, while the likes of Griff, he's been known to do some stuff on set, even getting supposedly fired for doing some sort of surgeon impression in the wrong way like 3 times. And I don't know why. 3 strikes and he's out? I could see somebody fumbling around way more than that. Either way you look at it though, both of these guys eventually come together as Doug's birthday is surprisingly brought onto him in a unique way. Griff actually ends things off with an actual VHS tape of something that they made back in the day. Basically, it's a Sasquatch horror film with a lot of foul language and stuff, and apparently, even though they wanted to have it marketed as an R-rated film, they apparently had to cut down a lot of stuff, some graphic violence, and a lot of language, on account of having it shown at a school performance show. But before they did so, they ensured that this VHS tape, while it would get stuck inside of the TV, they were able to see it for the first time in many years. And of course, rejoin the idea of creating films from the ground up just like they used to. A unique concept came around to which that Griff explains to Doug that he actually was able to obtain the rights for the Sony franchise known as Anaconda. This, of course, was a 1997 animal horror-based film about a giant snake that hunts people down. And it was a unique piece at the time, but Griff came up with the unique idea to jumpstart a career of filmmaking along with his best bud, or best buds, because eventually more people start to get on this. There's even the likes of 2 other people that get involved in this. Griff and Doug are basically accompanied by the likes of Claire and Kenny, played by Thandie Newton and Steve Zahn, respectively. They all come together at a restaurant and eventually make an agreement to create a reboot of Anaconda, indie style. And when they do so, they make their venturings out to South America, where they then meet up with an animal expert by the name of Santiago. Now, Santiago is the man for the job, not only because Kenny had known him for some time, even chatting with him on the phone. But Santiago, played by Selton Mello, actually carries his own Anaconda. And it's one that is very much like how it was depicted in the original films. So, accuracies aside, as well as the size, because the size of this Anaconda is more of the traditional 25, 30 feet long, which was typical in the Amazon rainforest. Of course, Santiago was also able to bring along the many more realistic aspects, such as how the snake behaves in real life. Anacondas, for the most part, they sleep in the water for most of their time, remain absolutely still like a statue, and wait for prey to come to them, usually drinking for water or otherwise. Then the snake will lunge out, grab a hold of them, constrict them, strike, wrap around them, as described by John Voight in the original film, and basically squeeze in hard as the air gasps out your lungs and causes your veins to explode. Yeah. Such infamous words left on by an old legend himself. Either way you look at it though, they use all of these facts that the original established, as well as having an actual animal expert who specializes in the snake department, in order to create an incredible reboot of the original Anaconda. Many years later, and they even find themselves a boat to do it, all because there actually is another person that joins in the group, Anna. She apparently is chased down by thugs armed to the teeth with rifles and handguns and other things as well. They also maintain radio communication, so that they're pretty hard to take down without any flack. Either way you look at it though, Anna was able to steal the keys to a certain boat, a boat that apparently was docked for some time. And the owner of the boat was apparently passed out at the bar, so this gave her the opportunity to escape from the clutches of these thugs, along with the crew members of the cast and filmmakers. So, with all 6 of these characters now in one specific spot, some might think of it as like Jaws, but with double the crew members. Because in Jaws, there was a boat in the ocean and 3 guys are aboard. But here, there's 6. And they're in the Amazon rainforest, in which it's possible some people are out there other than themselves. Along with a ton of animals. Not just snakes like anacondas, but tons of other species as well, that they'll encounter along the way. Either way you look at it though, they get to work. After a little accident with the anaconda occurs, and Griff himself is almost bitten in the ear. But this will come to be a more important factor later on though, because in one scene that they're creating on the boat, in which that Griff's character is supposed to be fighting for his life with the snake close to him, and basically Claire would be the one to try and escape from the boat. The thing is, Doug kept pressuring Griff to put the snake up close to his face to make it more realistic, but Griff ends up chucking it to the side and causing it to get gummed up by the propellers. Wow, what a surprise. The snake seemed rather calm and friendly, according to Santiago, but Griff just tosses it to the side and he gets mulched up into pieces. Like, it makes you wonder, should you feel bad about this? Or should you feel right about a possible killer snake getting killed off early? Well, either way, this probably is going to be one of the best parts that I'll talk about here. A snake funeral is held, even with the head of Hater, whom is actually the name of the anaconda that Santiago had explained about. And Hater is in fact, well, memorialized. Even a song is sung, which, trust me, this is not the first Jack Black movie I've seen where some unique comedic songs are thrown in. Remember School of Rock? Minecraft? Or even Kung Fu Panda had some musical elements over the years. Either way you look at it though, they have no snake now. No anaconda to work with. So what do they gotta do? They gotta venture out into the wild, where Santiago goes on a bit of an explanatory phase to at least let everybody know that anacondas out there in the wild are much larger, possibly beyond 50 feet long. So, not necessarily just twice as long as Hater, but also twice as gigantic. in many ways possible. Little did Santiago know that he himself is trudging into enemy territory that's unlike anything else he ever encountered, because while Griff has a hard time keeping up with him, Santiago's all alone now, and a killer's lying beneath the water and snatches him up. Wow. That was kind of a jump scare. And some people I know even freaked out a little bit. And think about it. Later this month, we're supposed to get another really scary movie. Primate. I don't know if I'll talk about that though, because there's already a lot of others we're expected to get for the next few months. Anyways though, Santiago is missing, but only we, audience members, know about what happened. So Doug and the others arrange a plan to go find him, venturing out into the jungle, and eventually encountering a small campsite. A van is parked there in the middle of the jungle, and Doug apparently has to go and fix up the engine and get the vehicle powered up again. He does so very quietly, as the snake is rather close to him, and surprise, he pops out the right side, almost biting him in the face. Wow. Like I said, the way they portrayed the Anaconda in the original film from '97, it was pretty scary just as well, but in a similar fashion, it's animated. And here, the animation actually seems more real, by any means. Apart from the Anaconda that they actually had on set, which was right in front of Griff's face before he chucked it off the boat into the propellers. Hater, if you know what I mean. It's still unique that they were able to actually get snake physics working on with the animation. It wasn't something that they ultimately did too well in the original, but it was the 90s. Little excuse can be made here, but we can at least give it the benefit of the doubt. But once they start moving on in the van, motorcyclists start chasing after him, and Anna arms herself with a rifle and is able to take out the guys as the crew essentially makes their way towards the boat. But surprise, surprise, there comes those thugs again. And more often than not, while a happy night of sleep is apparently made possible, it's still worth noting that by the start of the morning, things start to get even more hairy, because while they try to continue filming even without the snake in mind, Anna eventually comes along and betrays the group. Apparently she had been using them for her own gain, and now she's holding them hostage, arming herself with a rifle again, and taking him out to a certain remote location, a pier basically, where bags full of things are inside. And she does give him permission to see what's inside, and it's apparently chunks of gold. Apparently these thugs that were chasing after the crew members and Anna herself were apparently members of a local police or a militia department, basically. It's not entirely clear on what happened, and while we do get subtitles on what they're telling us, most importantly is the fact that Anna was apparently the bad guy the whole time. And I'd say it was still a unique twist. It was hard to truly tell if these guys were basically private military contractors sent out to assassinate Anna, or the fact that Anna herself was really the enemy this whole time. It was pretty hard to tell, even by my standards. And I am known to really discern the likes of good and evil. Still, though, it's quite a twist. As classic as many others out there in the film industry. But a heated battle does take place until Claire now gets a hold of the rifle, holds Anna, and, well, the snake comes back and takes her out. Wow. That's how you know you really got things heated up. They start to make a run for it, and while they are able to escape from the clutches of the snake due to him being distracted on the pier, the real trouble was they had nowhere to go. Little sense of direction as to what to do. Even worse though, Kenny, believe it or not, has to urinate. But weirdly, it does seem that he can't quite urinate even in a public restroom. How he managed to not do it for so long is beyond me, but this is probably a point which people might think it's a bit ridiculous. But most of us did laugh it out because, again, it's a comedy film. What can we expect? The reason why he had to urinate in the first place was because Doug ended up getting a tarantula on him, and the tarantula likely bit him in the leg. So they had to use urine by any means to neutralize the toxins and possibly prevent infection. And I'll just be clear on that real quick. It's true that urine can be seen as a folk remedy or something that village natives might use from time to time as a means to treat wounds and prevent infection, especially when they're bitten by certain venomous creatures. But you can't exactly rely on that all the time. Animal toxins vary depending on what species we're talking about here. And the tarantula that bit Doug, because it's not exactly explicitly stated on what happened, and we didn't really see a bite wound or him actually getting bitten by the tarantula, so can we really agree on that? Or is there something I'm missing here? Anyways though, it's a pretty long affair, probably longer than necessary, but for whatever reason, it becomes really funny real quickly when they finally manage to get Kenny to urinate on Doug's leg, and they all scream and cheer in happiness that he finally has rid himself of a horrible curse. So, I swear, the theater was literally roaring with clapping and all that stuff when I saw this. I couldn't make this stuff up even if I tried. Anyways though, they venture on further, only for Doug to surprise get eaten up. Oh man. It comes out of nowhere too. Oh, but just wait, because what eventually happens is that once they find out the way to get back to the boat, a field is apparently where they need to cross. But they need to get some bait in order to distract the snake, because since the field is a low-lying area with little foliage and little cover, they're going to have to sprint through the field while the snake is distracted. So they venture out to find some meat or a carcass, and they come across Doug's body. Yeah. It's incredible that the snake didn't actually swallow him whole, like what happened before. But they decide to use Doug's body. But I kid you not when I say this part is just as incredible and outrageous as what we've seen before. Because, first of all, they put Doug's body out in the middle of the field for the snake to enjoy, and they also have a pig attached to his back and a squirrel stuffed into his mouth. No joke. Snakes like squirrel meat. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true or not, because it's an anaconda. You can never really know what its true diet is like, because, again, it sleeps in the water for more than half the time. So, little to no knowledge truly is given on what the exact diet is like, but they do mostly believe that certain mammals, birds, or anything that ventures out into certain dangerous territory where the anaconda is living or sleeping at is possibly known to be part of the snake's diet, if not the full incorporated diet by any means. But once they have everything set up with Doug, they go out and find some cover, and they basically watch for the snake, and just when he's about to eat Doug, he wakes up. Oh my gosh. That was insane. I mean, my heart jumped out and wondering, how did Doug survive getting chomped up by an anaconda and spat out? Or vomited out? I don't really know. But now that Doug's alive and finds out there's a squirrel in his mouth and a pig strapped to him, he now has to make a run for it because he literally has bait for the snake attached to him. So when he does make a run for it, the snake follows him, and luckily the pig ends up getting ripped off of Doug's back. So the snake pretty much has the distraction that they were looking for to get out of there and go across the field to make their way back to the boat. However, it does seem that another wrong turn was made because they end up on what is known as the set. You see, earlier in the film, while they were still on the river, they happened to notice a few large boats with a lot of people in them. And they eventually found out that Griff had lied to them about the rights of Anaconda. He never owned them the whole time. It was apparently a classic ploy that he made to convince them to go along for the ride and to create the movie from scratch. But they didn't realize that Sony still had the full rights to be able to reboot the franchise on their own. And so this caused a lot of tension and even a fire/quit situation because Doug tried to fire Griff. Griff yells that he quits and just runs off on the motorboat. Basically, a smaller Zodiac, if you will. And eventually what does happen is that Griff actually spots the remains of the boats that they saw earlier, meaning the Anaconda must have attacked them and killed them all. All the crew members, even one woman who comes out of the jungle begging him to help, and then she gets eaten up right then and there in front of them. But now they have another part of the Anaconda reboot set to deal with, including a bunch of pyrotechnic equipment. Some explosive devices are laid out, and there's even Ice Cube. No joke. But apart from that though, they had many others to rescue as well. Eric Stoltz, John Boyd, and a number of other crewmates that were along for the ride of a reboot of the Anaconda franchise many years after the original, so to speak. This so-called unauthorized Anaconda that they were making alongside this official Anaconda reboot is also going to be a critical thing to look out for later on in the film. Anyways though, Ice Cube agrees to work with the guys, even allowing them to take a picture of him, a group photo, which also we'll talk a bit about later, as they organize a plan in order to defeat the snake once and for all by setting up a trap in the form of the explosives from the pyrotechnics area. They eventually set off with a vehicle nearby, and it's already impressive enough that they didn't have much copyrighted music, but the introduction of Ice Cube in this instance, set by AC/DC, will eventually be followed by another popular song from the 80s. Yeah, so Motley Crue actually sets off as the snake encounters the likes of Griff and Doug as they're driving away on a Wheeler vehicle and heading towards the pyrotechnic area. Meanwhile, with Kenny and Claire, they're trying to get the detonators to go off, but apparently they forgot to turn on the power first. And when they do so, it's only a matter of luck in this instance, because while the snake is caught in the explosion, it doesn't die. In fact, it barely looks like it was even phased. But eventually the guys end up cornered, of all things. And what eventually does happen though is something that's essentially a repeat in history. Griff takes out a flare gun in his hand, just like what happened many years ago with the Sasquatch film that they made years ago when they were kids. It's essentially a repeat of that old history, now in the form of killing a massive anaconda instead of a Sasquatch. Griff aims it at the fire fuel barrels and blows up the snake sky high into pieces. So that's 2 snakes that he managed to kill. I mean, what else could Paul Rudd do? Could he do something even more crazy than that? I guess we'll just have to see. Any other way you look at it though, it turns out that didn't kill the snake entirely, as its head is still alive. But Doug actually charges in, slamming something into his skull, piercing right through his brain and killing it. The anaconda was apparently killed off for good by Doug's World's Greatest Doug trophy. Apparently his son gave it to him as a gift, prior to him leaving the States, bound for the Amazon, for the filmmaking process. So, apart from the repeat in history that Griff made here, and also with the usage of a trophy that the son provides to his dad, that's one incredible way to take out a massive man-eating snake. So, I don't know about you, but after all that, it is quite a ride. We're still not done yet though, because what eventually happens is that once they make it back stateside, all the guys celebrate by watching their own film, and a number of things begin to happen as well, including Kenny getting married, Griff and Doug having their own careers boosted as a result of the film's success, and then of course a representative coming along from Sony to Doug's house to let him know that this unauthorized Anaconda remake was looked at by members of Sony, and they made the agreement that a sequel to Anaconda, the reboot of course, will be made shortly. And they want Doug to be a part of the working team to direct the new film. So he passes out right there, and pretty much the credits roll set to some Sir Mix-a-Lot remakes. So modified in a way so that it represents the Anaconda film entirely. Now I will say, this is one incredible way to remake a somewhat lesser known franchise. Because while Anaconda was popular back in the day, it didn't exactly hit all the notes it possibly could, knowing Sony's reputation over the years. And more so, when you understand the facts about Anaconda being a pretty notorious snake because of its size, the fact that they were able to create something that's probably more akin to the Titanoboa, which was also a real creature, but it was unfortunately discovered many years after the original Anaconda came around, as the remnants of the Titanoboa were first found in a coal mine. Yeah, a coal mine in 2009, 12 years after the first Anaconda film came around. So they didn't quite know, but the Anaconda was more akin to a real-life giant snake that would have measured as high as 60 feet long end to end. So whether it was a coincidence or something else entirely, all of us can agree this was one impressive remake. Not everybody was a fan of it for what it was. I mean, sure, the urinating part is a bit questionable, and sure, having Doug, while he was still alive, just straight up unconscious, set up as bait for the snake, that was quite a crazy idea. But at least luck was on their side, and they found out Doug was still alive, and he was able to make a run for it, allowing for the pig to be ripped off from his back and used as the bait that they needed to get out of there via the fields. Still though, I'd say this is one impressive way to wrap up the year of 2025. And we've seen a lot of really good films for 2025. I mean, there was Dogman, there was Minecraft, there was Final Destination Bloodlines, Bad Guys 2, Jurassic World Rebirth, How to Train Your Dragon live action remake, which probably did a lot better than a majority of the many Disney live action remakes. And of course, with some of the more recent picks like Tron Ares and Avatar Fire and Ash, I'd say Anaconda deserves an 8.9 out of 10.1. Granted, it's not exactly the best score-wise, because The Bad Guys 2 was a near perfect way to create a sequel out of what is already a pretty amazing film. Almost perfect in its entirety. But, either way, both Bad Guys films had maxed out the score at 10.1 each, bringing it to 20.2 across both films. But Anaconda, in this instance, it's not too often where a remake actually becomes better than the original, let alone the whole franchise. Still, they nearly nailed it. If they ironed out a few little things here and there, I would have given it a much higher score, but they still did an outstanding job here. So, that's pretty much that. But in any case though, I'm going to get back to my break time, of course, spend my time a little more wisely, and I'll eventually be coming back with more material for films I should have talked about years ago. Probably something else that's more monster-oriented. Like the Monsterverse? I could talk a bit more about those films. But I'll see you guys then. Otherwise.